You ever notice how easily we talk about us and them? You see it everywhere, right? In politics, sports, even just between neighborhoods. Well, today we're going to dig into the root of that division, a concept some sources are calling a modern pandemic, othering. All right, let's get into it.
It really all boils down to this one big question. How do we actually draw that line between our group and another? The answer, it turns out, is in the very building blocks of who we are.
You know, our identity is kind of a balancing act. On the one hand, you have sameness. That's the glue, right? The shared values, the inside jokes, the experiences that connect us to our community. But on the other hand, our identity is also defined by difference, all the things that make our group unique and distinct from others. And look, both of these are totally natural, totally normal parts of being human. So let's dig into that first part, that deep, natural impulse to find our us. This is what we're calling the us versus them instinct. And it's super important to remember this isn't inherently a good or a bad thing, it's just a fundamental piece of our social DNA.
I mean, think about it. We are wired for community. Finding our group, our tribe, our us, it gives us a sense of safety, a sense of trust, a feeling of belonging. It's how we make sense of a really complicated world. It's a basic human need. But, and this is a big but, there's a point where this healthy, normal instinct can get twisted into something, well, something pretty toxic.
And that exact moment, the point where belonging sours and turns toxic, that's the real turning point in this story. This is where we shift from the natural act of forming groups to a genuinely destructive process, what our sources call othering, the social disease. Okay, so this is the key thing to get. Othering isn't just about noticing that someone is different. It's the thought process of taking those differences and slapping negative, threatening labels on them. It's what transforms they're different from us into they're less than us, or worse, they're a danger to us. So how does this social disease actually work? Well, it's got a few moves. First, it devalues the other to make us feel better, more superior. Then it does this thing called essentializing differences. Basically, it pretends that these differences are natural, permanent, and unchangeable, not just social ideas. It spins up myths and nasty stories about the outgroup. And finally, it shoves people into these tight, rigid boxes, totally ignoring how diverse people really are. So if othering is the toxic way of thinking, the disease itself, what are the symptoms? That brings us right here, to discrimination, the tangible harm. This is where the rubber meets the road, where those negative thoughts explode into real-world harmful actions. To put it simply, discrimination is the action of treating people unfairly just because of the group they belong to. It's the real physical symptom that grows directly out of the mental disease of othering. It's taking that whole us versus them mindset and making it painfully real. And this harm, it shows up in a few different ways. You've got direct discrimination, which is pretty obvious, slurs being openly excluded, but then there's indirect discrimination, which is way sneakier. Our sources even use a specific term, yoksima, which is the act of just ignoring someone, pretending they don't even exist. And then you have intersectional discrimination, which is when a person gets targeted for multiple parts of their identity all at once, which just multiplies the harm. And the fallout from all this? Man, it is absolutely devastating. It can cause what's called identity erosion, where people start to believe the negative things said about them. It creates these deep feelings of insecurity where you're afraid to just be yourself in public. On a bigger scale, it rips society apart, pushing people into isolated communities, and it can make people feel so silenced and powerless that they just check out of public life altogether. But that damage, that pain, it's not the end of the story. Not even close. The human spirit is just incredibly resilient, and sometimes those painful experiences can be transformed into something else entirely. This is where we get to talk about memories, resilience, and power. It sounds a little counterintuitive, right? But the source material points to this incredible turning point. The very act of facing discrimination can actually trigger a powerful kind of awakening. It can force you to learn, to really understand the systems at play, and to build a stronger, more conscious identity because of it. So how does that actually happen? How does pain become purpose? Well, think of it this way. Those painful memories, they can become lessons, warnings to guide and protect your family and your community. They become fuel for your own empowerment, pushing you to learn more and stand up for yourself. They build these incredible bonds of solidarity with other people who just get it. And ultimately, that shared experience can inspire people to come together and demand justice.
So, if othering is the disease and discrimination is the symptom, then what in the world is the cure? That brings us to our final section, building bridges, finding cures. And the sources are really clear on this. There is no magic pill. It's going to take a combination of huge systemic changes and real individual responsibility.
Okay, so at the big societal level, we need a serious toolkit. We're talking about strong laws with a zero-tolerance approach to discrimination. We need independent institutions that can actually hold people accountable. It means we have to change education itself to make it genuinely inclusive. And this is a huge one. We have to collect good data so we actually know how big the problem really is. And we absolutely cannot forget the media's role in all of this. The words and images we see in the news and in entertainment have so much power. The responsibility here is massive, to use language that builds bridges and promotes peace, not language that reinforces old prejudices just to get a few more clicks. And this really gets to the absolute heart of the solution. It's such a powerful idea from the sources. The goal isn't to make everyone the same. It's not to get rid of the other. The real goal, the cure, is to stop the toxic process of othering. Difference itself isn't the problem. Demonizing differences. So what does that mean for us, for you and me? Well, it leads us to the main antidote for othering. And it's something that sounds simple, but it's definitely not easy. It's making a conscious effort to know, to understand, and to just be aware of the people we've been taught to see as them. Because the sources are clear on this. Empathy isn't some magical feeling that just appears. It's a skill, and it grows from awareness and from understanding. So as we wrap this up, the big takeaway is crystal clear. The problem isn't that different groups of people exist. The problem is the walls we build between those groups through the act of othering. And that leaves us with one final question to really think about. Which wall, which assumption, which stereotype, which little prejudice are you going to start tearing down first?